Hi everybody, welcome back, glad you could tune in again. Let's take a look at 1 Timothy. This is Paul's first recorded letter to his younger associate Timothy, and I want to share with you just a couple of thoughts about the scenario that it's written into and then some of the emphases that you'll find within it. Chapter 1 verse 3 tells us, roughly speaking, the scenario in which Timothy found himself. Paul writes, "As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus, that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine." So there you get a sense of the scenario that Timothy finds himself in, receiving this letter. He's in Ephesus, Paul has gone to Macedonia, and Timothy clearly has some kind of role leading the church, and in particular trying to put in place the instincts and structures and the teaching and so on necessary in order to guard the church against what Paul euphemistically calls different doctrine, which is described in various ways in the letter, false teaching of various kinds, and you see hints of that in 1 Timothy and indeed in 2 Timothy. Now, with all that in mind, you'd expect this letter, 1 Timothy, to have more to say specifically to men than to women, and in some senses that's true. I'll say something about that in a second. Of course, this has a great deal to say to men and women, old and young, but let me just highlight a few things that men, younger men and older men, more mature in years, might want to reflect on. Let me highlight first chapter 3, the qualifications for elders and the qualifications for deacons. I've remarked previously that I believe these are qualifications to which all people, all men, ought to aspire. It's not the case, obviously, that every man will be ordained as a deacon or ordained as an elder. Churches don't need everybody to be in that office, but it certainly is the case that every church would be stronger to the degree that the men in the church exemplified these characteristics. I challenge you to read through them and ask yourself, are there any of these things I don't really think I want to be? Any of these things that I don't really think I need to aspire to? There may be some which you feel are further beyond you than others, able to teach. That's a challenge for many people who find that kind of calling difficult. Clearly, if you're not married, then the household requirements are going to be difficult for you to fulfill. But nonetheless, there are many characteristics of godliness and maturity in the faith here, which I urge you all to aspire to. And wouldn't our church be stronger if, read through these verses, we as men all exemplified in overflowing measure these characteristics of maturity and faithfulness? That's the first thing to highlight. The second thing is to highlight that it's really never too young to begin. From chapter 4, it appears that Timothy is somewhere on the young side. It's not clear exactly how young, but he's clearly young enough that some people might be inclined to despise or hold him in low esteem for that reason. So Paul urges Timothy, let no one despise you for your youth, your youngness, in other words. But notice, he doesn't tell the other people not to despise Timothy. He tells Timothy to conduct himself in such a way that it never really occurs to anybody to despise him because of his youth. He goes on, verse 12, set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. Timothy, if you set the believers an example in those ways, they won't despise you, even though you might be somewhat on the young side. And as I said, it's not clear, at least to me and to most commentators, as far as I can make out exactly how young Timothy is. So maybe that's a general point for us to observe. However young you are, let no one despise you for the kind of youthful immaturity that would not be characterized by godly speech and conduct and love and faith and purity. In a similar vein, there's a great deal here about how to relate to different sorts of people in the church. And men, I urge you to take this to heart and to think about it a little bit. Let me just read to you a couple of verses from the start of chapter 5. Don't rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Treat younger men like brothers, older women like mothers, younger women like sisters, in all purity. It's worth thinking about that, isn't it? How do we relate to older men, men who are younger than us, to women our own age or a touch older, or to younger ladies? Paul clearly thinks that there are distinctive modes of relationship and engagement, so to speak, with people in different positions in life which are appropriate, and it also depends on other aspects of their station in life. Widows, for example, Timothy's relationship with widows is addressed in the rest of chapter 5 at some length. Finally, one thought here, right at the end of chapter 6, where Paul addresses those whom he describes as rich in this present age, or rather he tells Timothy how to address them. Charge them not to be haughty, that is proud, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. And then this always strikes me as something of an antidote to the feeling of, well, frankly, guilt that can sometimes be present in the hearts of those who do have a great deal to thank God for materially. And really, that's most of us. Historically speaking, almost all of us would be among the wealthiest people, materially speaking, who have ever been among the people of God. If we were lined up among the company of all the believers who've ever lived down the ages, we would certainly be materially better off than almost all of them. So on Paul's scale of values, we all count pretty much as rich in this present age. How are those who have so much as we have been given to respond to the feelings of, well, not quite guilt, but something like that sometimes we might feel? Well, guilt isn't an appropriate response. Instead, they're to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. Generosity and sharing are the ways to deal with the abundance that God has blessed us with. And if Paul could see the abundance that God has blessed us with as a church community, and many of us as individuals, surely he would underscore these words even more sharply. So some things, hopefully, that may be useful for you as you're digging into that letter, 1 Timothy, to explore and to meditate on and pray about yourselves. The Lord bless you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.